Hello and welcome back to Bridging the Gap, where we explore the tools and mindsets to elevate your life and leadership. I'm Sanchita, and today we are diving into a topic that reflects or affects everyone's decision we make. That is, it relates to our reasoning. We all have biases, and they are invisible filters that shape how we see the world, but they can also cloud our judgment. The good news is, once you learn to identify and correct these biases, we unlock the ability to make clearer, more empowered decisions. So, by the end of this episode, you will have actionable steps to spot and overcome these biases so you can think more critically and lead with confidence. Now, let's dive into this. Understanding bias. Let's start by understanding what biases are. In simple terms, biases are mental shortcuts that help us process information quickly. While they are often useful, they can also lead us astray. Think about confirmation bias, the tendency to focus on information that supports what you already believe, ignoring the evidence that contradicts it. Another common one is availability bias. Ever made a decision based on the most recent information instead of the most relevant one? That is called availability bias at play. These unconscious filters are part of human being, but they can hinder us from seeing the full picture. Now let me give you an example. Imagine you are hiring someone and unconsciously favor a candidate who shares your alma mater. That's affinity bias. And while it feels instinctive, it may not lead to the best decision for your team. Recognizing these patterns is the first step to breaking free from all these typical biases that we have. Now, how do we identify these biases? Now that we have unpacked what biases are, how do you spot them in your thinking? Let me give you three powerful techniques for that. Pause and reflect. The first step is awareness. When making a decision, ask yourself, what assumptions am I making? Or am I considering all perspectives? Self-awareness disrupts automatic thinking. Second, seek diverse perspectives. Surround yourself with people who challenge your views. Diversity in thought exposes the blind spots and broadens your understanding. Check the evidence. Use logic to evaluate decisions. Are you relying on anecdotal evidence or do you have a data to back your choice? Asking these questions helps ground your reasoning. Think of these strategies as mental exercises to keep your mind agile and unbiased. Start observing. That is the key. Now let's talk about some of the tools to correct biases. Now if we talk about neuro-linguistic programming, it offers tools to reframe your thinking and challenge biases. There is a model which says meta model questions. These are specific questions to uncover assumptions. For example, ask yourself, what am I assuming to be true here? Or what would happen if the opposite were true? These questions forces your brain to think beyond its default settings. Pattern interrupts. When you catch yourself leaning on a bias, you do something unexpected. For instance, if you are about to decide based on a gut feeling, take a deep breath and write down your reasoning instead of just blindly believing it. Visualization techniques. Visualization is for decision making. It gives a different perspective. Imagine how mentor's critic would approach the same situation. This creates a mental shift, breaking the bias loop. These techniques don't just improve your thinking, they empower you to lead with greater clarity and fairness. Now, let me give you a very relatable example. Let me share a story from one of my coaching sessions. A client of mine, a talented manager, realized her confirmation bias was affecting how she evaluated her team. She tended to favor employees who mirrored her communication style, unintentionally overlooking the other's contribution. By practicing these strategies we discussed, especially seeking diverse perspectives, she began to see the unique strengths in her every team member. And the results? A more cohesive and innovative team. Let me give you another example. Think about a time when you made a snap judgment about someone. Perhaps you assumed they were uninterested because they did not speak up. But later you learned they were simply processing the information. This is how biases create misunderstandings, but awareness can bridge that gap. So, with that, we come to the end of today's episode, and I want to thank you for joining me on Bridging the Gap today. Thank you for joining me on this journey to unmask biases and sharpen your reasoning. Remember, spotting and correcting biases isn't about being perfect, it's about being intentional. When you take the time to question your assumptions, you open the door to better decisions and stronger relationships. Now, here's an action step for you this week. Identify one bias you have noticed in your thinking. Practice reframing it using the techniques we discussed. And if you are up for it, share your experience with me. I would love to hear how this episode resonated with you. If today's conversation sparked a new perspective, share it with someone who could benefit. Let's continue to bridge the gap, one mindset shift at a time. Until next time, I want to remind you to think critically, lead with intention. Take care and keep growing. Bye bye.